Welcome to Asian Saga. If you missed this anime or just need a refresher, don't worry. I've got you covered with a fast, fun, and epic recap. As soon as Tokaiwa was stepped into the gathering place, he was stunned to see three handsome guys sitting across from him. So a girl from his class had invited him. So why were there only men here? Suspecting he had come to the wrong place, he quickly dialed Sue's number, only for the most mischievous-looking handsome guy sitting across from him. To answer, Sue explained that they had just finished working at the cross-dressing bar, and to save time, they had come straight to the mixer without changing. She had also brought two friends Kawaku and Fuji. Excitedly, she suggested playing the King's game. Unexpectedly, their friend Asagi drew the king card and casually ordered two people too. Kiss it just happened to be Sue and Kawaku. Without hesitation, the two pressed their lips together, while Fuji eagerly snapped photos from the side. Hagi sensed something was off, and when it was his turn to draw a lot, he ended up assigning Tokaiwa and Sue to have intimate interaction. As Sue was contemplating how to conquer Tokaiwa, he, despite knowing that Sue was actually a girl, found himself flustered by her handsome appearance and escaped to the bathroom. Seeing this, Fuji excitedly wanted to follow and gather material for a manga. It was stopped by Kawaku. With a smirk, Sue pulled out photos of the three of them cross-dressing as girls in their daily lives. Hagi, now highly motivated, forced the group back to the table, only to find Fuji using Sue and Kawaku as models for his manga. While Kawaku looked completely done with life, Sue casually invited everyone to a karaoke bar. Being invited again made Tokaiwa feel both flattered and uneasy. After all, these three handsome guys were way too dazzling. The atmosphere grew increasingly strange as Sue proposed a karaoke scoring contest. Fearing another bizarre punishment, Hagi hesitated. But Tokaiwa full of confidence declared he could score 98 points, hoping to make Sue and the others change back into women's clothing so things would feel more normal. However, Sue completely crushed him in the contest, flipping the game into a punishment round. Just as the waiter entered with food, he was about to stop what seemed like a group of men surrounding a girl until he looked closer. Tokaiwa was now wearing a dress. He instantly lost all hope in life, while Sue gave a knowing smirk, clearly planning to continue teasing him. Hagi was laughing so hard he couldn't straighten up, while Kawaku looked slightly sympathetic, but still struggled to suppress a smile. Asagi, meanwhile, noticed the glimmer of inspiration in Fuji's eyes for a new manga and casually invited Kawaku to become, believing Kawaku was a professional model. Asagi startled him so much that he grabbed a soda and took a sip, only for Hagi to realize his own cup was now empty. That was mine. Kawaku immediately looked embarrassed, his cheeks turning slightly red. Seeing his shy and innocent reaction, Hagi's heart unexpectedly skipped a beat. But then he remembered that Kawaku was currently dressed as a guy, leaving him utterly confused. After leaving the KTV, Fuji took the group to a game arcade. Asagi was amazed by Fuji's incredible claw machine skills and watched ensuing as Fuji effortlessly won prizes. Noticing this, Fuji decided to teach Asagi how to play. Meanwhile, Hagi, still dwelling on their indirect kisses earlier, worried that Kawaku might mind to make up for it. He quickly grabbed the plushie and gave it to Kawaku, expecting her to dislike something so cute. Hagi was surprised when she accepted it without hesitation. As the cheerful mood continued, Tokaiwa noticed Sue staring at the photo booth, but hesitating, likely because men weren't allowed to enter alone, since she was still in men's clothes. She seemed a little disappointed. Without thinking much, Tokaiwa casually suggested, "Why not just take a photo with your phone?" Sue's eyes lit up immediately as she pulled Tokaiwa in for a selfie. Before he could react, she pressed in close and snapped a photo, sending his heart into overdrive. Damn it, this person is seriously dangerous. The next day at school, Tokaiwa assumed that Sue wouldn't show up either. But to his surprise, Sue arrived on time, dressed in her usual male attitude. The moment she stepped into the classroom, the girls behind Tokaiwa collectively gasped, utterly mesmerized by her overwhelming handsomeness. During class, Tokaiwa realized he had forgotten his textbook and was feeling frustrated when Sue lightly nudged her arm, signaling for him to use hers. After class, Sue went to submit a report. But before Tokaiwa could leave, two girls blocked her path with serious expressions. "What's your relationship with our mysterious prince?" Tokaiwa blinked in confusion. The girls explained that Sue had frequently attended school in male's attire, earning her the secret nickname Mysterious Prince due to her unreal good looks and enigmatic aura. Before Tokaiwa could figure out how to respond, Sue returned with a teasing smile. She said, "For now, we're just friends." The two girls immediately lost their minds, squealing in excitement. Back at the dorm, Hegi glared at his two friends, pointing an accusatory finger at them. "You traitors, you've all hooked up with your group dating partners." Asagi tilted his head in confusion. "Ours. You sure you Ray not just upset that Kawaku doesn't like you?" Hegi stiffened, visibly shaken, but quickly put on a tough front. Yet not long after, fate played its hand. That afternoon, while wandering through the shopping district, Hegi ran into Kawaku, who was delivering a package to customers. Just as they crossed paths, the sky suddenly darkened, and heavy rain poured down. Without thinking, Hegi quickly pulled Kawaku under a nearby awning. Then he noticed the rain had soaked through Kawaku's clothes, turning the fabric semi-transparent, revealing the faint outline beneath. Kawaku's cheeks flushed as she realized it too. Well, Hegi, acting on instinct, yanked off his jacket and tossed it over her. He refused to admit, even to himself, that his heart had just skipped a beat. After all, Kawaku was dressed as a so was this attraction to a man or a woman? Hegi's mind spiraled into chaos. His sense of orientation twisted into awning-led mess. A shopkeeper nearby kindly lent them an umbrella. Yeah, but Hegi insisted on walking Kawaku back to the host club. As they walked side by side, Kawaku suddenly noticed something. Hegi's left shoulder was completely drenched. Kawaku's face turned an even deeper shade of red. That day, Sue invited Tokaiwa and the others to visit the cross-dressing bar where she worked. However, Hegi quietly slipped away. He had been questioning his feelings too much lately. The bar is surprisingly all women. The moment Tokaiwa stepped inside, he was immediately stunned by the sight of a group. Fuji behind the bar smirked knowingly and slid a cocktail over to him. "Drink up. You look like you need it." Watching Asagi and Fuji interact so naturally, Tokaiwa found himself unexpectedly at ease. He mused, this place feels completely different from Amade Cafe. Hearing this Sue's interesting peek. "Oh, you've been to a maid cafe?" "It was just once. I only went there for an omelet rice," Tokaiwa hurriedly clarified. But Sue's eyes gleamed with mischief. "Well then today, you're going to experience our version of omelet rice." A few minutes later, an omelet rice was placed in front of Tokaiwa. The most shocking part? The delicate ketchup heart drawn on top, meticulously crafted by Sue herself. Tokaiwa stared at the dishes, his heart skipping a beat. This girl, she's way too good at this. As more and more customers have arrived, Sue's usual fans began gathering. Asagi noticed Kawaku sitting alone and invited her to join him. But the moment she turned to face him, Asagi nearly flinched. Her aura was completely different from usual, with cold and powerful presence. Fuji mentioned she's playing the role of a cool and she's not that great at it dominant host. But honestly, at that moment Kawaku suddenly asked, "Where's Hegi?" Before Tokaiwa could answer, Kawaku's expression darkened. "Damn it, if he's not here, I can't return his jacket." Soon after, Hegi received a message from Kawaku. She wanted to meet up. Hegi's heart pounded. Was she mad at him? Bracing himself, he went to meet her, only to find that Kawaku just wanted to return his jacket. Hegi took the jacket, inhaling a faint trace of Kawaku's scent lingering on it. For some reason, it calmed him, making all his tension fade away. Just then, a waiter approached and recommended the cafe's newest dessert. Kohaku's eyes lit up, but hesitated. Two guys sitting together, eating fancy sweets? Hegi, however, didn't care at all. Food is meant to be enjoyed. Kohaku relaxed and was about to place an order. Kohaku mentions, "I really do love desserts, but to Hegi, it sounds close to I like you." His heart thudded. Wait a what? No. I can't fall for someone with a handsome guy's face. Fuji grew increasingly dissatisfied with her manuscript, so she decided to completely redo it overnight, with Sue and the others busy with work. Kawaku asked if Fuji had any other friends who could help. Fuji smacked her forehead as realization struck Asagi. Without hesitation, she sent a desperate SOS message. Excited, Asagi rushed over, assuming he was going to be a model. But upon arrival, he found Fuji so busy that she hadn't even had time to take off her wig after work. She had jumped straight into drawings. Only then did Asagi realize he wasn't here to pose, but to assist with shading and screen toning. Still, he didn't mind at all. Instead, he was thrilled. "This is great. I've always wanted to try this." Fuji, too occupied to explain further, handed him the tools and got back to work. Meanwhile, Sue called to check on their progress. Kawaku, glancing at Asagi's eager expression, hesitated before turning to Fuji. "You're letting Asagi help, but aren't you drawing in our 18 Dujin?" Fuji froze. She had completely forgotten about that. Realizing that her content might be a bit too much for Asagi, she quickly rearranged her manuscript, carefully removing the intense scenes and leaving only the deep brotherly bond moments for Asagi to work on. Asagi carefully examined the pages and was visibly moved. Wow, the sick best friend gets pushed onto the bed and cared for. What a touching story of friendship. Fuji, Asagi frowned in confusion. Wait, aren't you supposed to be a battle manga artist? Where's the action scene? Fuji avoided eye contact, all very engaging in close combat. Asagi nodded in understanding. So it's a hand-to-hand fight. Fuji sighed in relief as Asagi accepted this explanation without further questions. The two worked tirelessly until morning. When Asagi learned that Fuji hadn't slept for 3 days, he immediately pushed her onto the bed. "Go to sleep already. I'll keep watching." Fuji blinked. This scene was exactly like the one she had just drawn. She silently prayed that Asagi wouldn't say anything weird. Fortunately, he was just genuinely looking after her. Before they knew it, they both ended up falling asleep together. Meanwhile, Tokaiwa was reviewing his coursework when he suddenly realized he had forgotten to complete an assignment. Panicked, he quickly messaged Sue for help. "Sue, I'm at the library." Without hesitation, Tokaiwa rushed over. After searching for a while and finding no sign of Sue, he was about to ask a nearby girl for help when she looked up, and he froze in shock. Sue, the girl in front of him, had delicate features and an elegant, gentle demeanor. Sue, in female attire. Seeing his stunned expression, Sue smiled casually. What? Surprised? I do wear my regular clothes sometimes, you know? After quickly copying the assignment, Sue suddenly suggested, let's go have a drink. To help him relax, she changed back into her male disguise and took him to a bar. Tokaiwa was worried about being a burden, so he quietly focused on drinking until he ended up drinking too much. Coincidentally, 2 female students from his class were also at the bar. That's the legendary mysterious prince, and he's drinking with Tokaiwa. They were beyond envious. What kind of insane luck does Tokaiwa have? Meanwhile, Tokaiwa, too nervous to think straight, kept downing drink after drink until he finally collapsed onto the table, completely out cold. Sue sighed. This scene feels just like a fairy tale. Who knows, maybe a true love's kiss will wake him up. The 2 female students held their breaths, eyes locked onto Sue. And then, Sue leaned down and pressed a soft kiss onto Tokaiwa's forehead. Tokaiwa remained fast asleep. The 2 girls. This is definitely not just a friendship. Lately, the 6 of them had grown closer, so Sue suggested they go on a weekend trip together. Hegi, on the other hand, was secretly hoping to see the girls in their female outfits. However, when Tokaiwa and the other 2 arrived at the meeting spot, the girls were nowhere to be seen. Worse yet, Asagi had been pulled into a car, leaving Tokaiwa and Hegi scrambling to rescue him, only to find that the one holding onto Asagi was Fuji. Kawaku, pressing Fuji down, apologized on her behalf. That day, Sue was the one driving, with a commanding air. She firmly instructed Tokaiwa to sit in the passenger seat. Watching her get into the car, Tokaiwa couldn't help but admire how effortlessly cool Sue looked. He was still fumbling with his seatbelt when Sue leaned over with a smile and effortlessly buckled it for him. As the journey continued, Sue's flirtatious tactics became increasingly bold. Tokaiwa felt like he had somehow stumbled into a shoujo manga, with himself as the heroine, being relentlessly pursued. Their destination was a popular zoo. Sue went ahead and bought 6 tickets. Hegi, still confused, mumbled, "Why are we spending our days off at the zoo with a bunch of handsome guys?" But Sue's real purpose for coming was simple. She wanted to see the pandas. Since there was still some time before the panda exhibit opened, they decided to split up. Sue and Fuji exchanged glances, then swiftly dragged their respective partners away before agreeing to meet at noon. This left Kawaku and Hegi alone together. Hegi was currently experiencing a major identity crisis. He knew Kawaku was a girl, yet seeing her in male attire still made his heart race. Did this mean he wasn't straight? He repeatedly told himself not to feel anything. But just as he turned around, he saw Kawaku in the small animal interaction area, holding a tiny creature in her arms, and she looked adorable. When Kawaku picked up a guinea pig and casually commented, "Hey, doesn't this little guy kind of look like you?" Hegi, without thinking, blurted out, "Cute." He instantly froze. Crap, Kawaku assumed he was talking about the guinea pig, but even she looked momentarily flustered before quickly brushing it off. Both of them were a little too stubborn for their own good. Meanwhile, Fuji had successfully lured Asagi into the insect exhibit. She found a twisted kind of satisfaction in watching cockroaches struggle in a completely safe environment. A true sadist at heart, Asagi, however, was trembling with fear. Unable to take it anymore, he clung to Fuji's waist, buried his face in her shoulder, and shook like a frightened puppy. Fuji, slightly guilty, was about to lead him out of the exhibit when she was distracted by a massive spider. Asagi, thinking they had already exited the insect area, he opened his eyes only to come face to face with the giant spider. His scream echoed through the entire zoo. Tokaiwa vaguely heard Asagi's terrified shriek in the distance, but at that moment, Sue was standing under the sunlight, glowing as she turned back and called him over to look at the tigers. Honestly, the combination of Sue and a tiger suited her way too well. As they made their way back to her group, they stumbled upon a lost little girl. Because Sue looked just like a prince straight out of a fairy tale, the children instinctively trusted her. The two of them brought her to the announcement center. But by the time they finished, they had completely missed the panda exhibit. Tokaiwa considered just letting it go, but when he glanced at Sue, he could tell she was disappointed. She hadn't said anything, but he knew she had been looking forward to this the most. At that moment, a staff member was pushing a cart full of discarded mascot heads past them. A wild idea popped into Tokaiwa's head. He quickly excused himself, borrowed a panda head, and sprinted to the gift shop, where he bought matching pandas and tiger canes. Then, still catching his breath, he returned, now wearing the giant panda head. Sue, seeing the canes he handed her, smiled softly and murmured, "This is exactly what I like about you." The little girl, now awake, stared at them for a long moment before innocently asking, "Are you two dating?" Neither of them answered, but before the question could sink in, the little girl's attention was quickly drawn to the life-size panda mascot standing before her. Later, after safely reuniting with their group, the little girl's father arrived to pick her up. As they were leaving, Sue casually commented, "I still got to see some pandas today." For some time after that, Sue could often be seen carrying around those two canes wherever she went. Asagi was invited by Fuji to attend the summer doujinshi convention. As he was busy admiring the many cosplayers dressed in elaborate outfits, Fuji had already tracked him down. Right at that moment, a nearby booth owner was chatting with a customer. You know, a super hot male artist showed up at the BL Section 28 today. Wait, this was BL Section 28. Right. Why were two guys walking around like this? Asagi soon realized that Fuji was selling the manga he had helped assist with. Just as he was about to buy a copy, Fuji suddenly remembered Kawaku's warning. Asagi doesn't really understand these kinds of things. If he got scared off by the content, she'd lose a valuable assistant for future projects. So she refused to sell it to him. And right on cue, Fuji received a message from another artist. Someone had saved a copy of a manga for her. Fuji quickly ran off to grab her reserved manga, while Asagi stayed behind, unknowingly helping Fuji sell books. Watching people buy Fuji's work, he felt genuinely happy. This meant Fuji's art was well loved. Suddenly, a girl rushed up to the booth, excitedly proclaiming, "I'm a huge fan of Fuji-sensei." Wait, the artist is a guy. Panicked, Asagi waved his hands wildly. No, no, no. I'm just an assistant. The girl, still blushing, explained that this was her first time attending a convention, and she was nervous about speaking to Fuji. She asked Asagi to deliver a gift to her instead. Instead of accepting the gift, he handed it back. "You should give it to her in person." The girl hesitated, looking extremely nervous. Right at that moment, Fuji returned. A super handsome guy stood before her. Her brain shut down completely. With all the strength she could muster, she screamed, "I'm your biggest fan," before slamming the gift into Fuji's hands and bolting away. Fuji, holding the small gift, blinked in confusion. This was the first time someone had ever called themselves her fan. Asagi turned to her. "Aren't you happy?" Fuji nodded slightly. The next day, Sue received a call from Kawaku, asking her to remind Fuji to come to work. Sue went to Fuji's place, but was completely shocked when the door was opened by Asagi. Her pupils shrank. What the hell happened last night? Apparently, after eating, Asagi and Fuji kept drinking, and when they weren't satisfied, they went back to Fuji's place to continue. With a raised brow, Sue narrowed her eyes at Fuji. "So, you're telling me all you did was drink?" Fuji shook her head. Asagi, who had been completely wasted, was photographed in all kinds of ridiculous poses. Realizing what she had done, Fuji smirked. Not the slightest bit guilty. Asagi, horrified, turned bright red. "You took pictures of me while I was asleep." Sue sighed in exhaustion. This is where you're supposed to get mad, Asagi. Natural airheads are terrifying, Fuji casually called out to Asagi. Hey, stick around. Let's go to the bar together later. Fuji grinned. Stay for lunch. I made omelet rice. The two sat down, and Asagi eagerly dug in. It's delicious, he said between bites. Fuji suddenly leaned forward. Feed me a bit. Without thinking, Asagi offered her a spoonful. Fuji took it, chewed thoughtfully, then smirked. Tastes just like before. Meanwhile, Hegi finally puts the pieces together. Hegi received a call from Asagi. The day before, Asagi had sent him pictures of the barbecue they had eaten, but something was off. Hegi stared at the image. The girl sitting across from Asagi was Fuji. And not only that, Asagi was currently at the host club, along with Kawaku and Sue. Sue, as if sensing the confusion from miles away, sent Tokaiwa a message. Come join us for lunch. Hegi, still recovering from his earth-shattering realization, was too embarrassed to show up. Tokaiwa, however, did go. And while eating, he noticed something strange. Sue was holding a plushie that looked exactly like him. Confused, he asked, "Where did you get that?" Fuji, casually sipping her drink, smirked. I made it. After lunch, Sue suggested playing a word association game, where the goal was to make the opponent flustered. Whoever got embarrassed lost. Tokaiwa, knowing he stood no chance against Sue, immediately surrendered. Sue, still holding the plushie, smiled and motioned him closer. Come here. Tokaiwa hesitated. Why? Sue's smile widened. I want to do something indescribable with it. Tokaiwa's brain shut down. What did she mean by that? Panicked, he jumped back. Was she using it as a voodoo doll? At that moment, Tokaiwa became a whole new species of dumbfounded. One day, while playing video games together, Hegi suddenly turned to Tokaiwa and asked, Would you ever fall for Sue? Tokaiwa replied, Anyone would feel something for her, right? Hegi hesitated for a moment before confessing, I think I might not be that straight. Seeing Kawaku in male attire made his heart race, and he wasn't sure what to make of it. Asagi, however, couldn't understand Hegi's dilemma at all. Kawaku is a girl, though what does it matter how she dresses? Hegi struggled to explain. So Asagi suggested he meet up with Kawaku again and see how he felt. Sue was delighted to see Tokaiwa walk in. Meanwhile, Hegi noticed that Kawaku wasn't working that day. Feeling a bit lost, he asked Sue to flirt with him, just to test if he would react. Sue played along, whispering a smooth pickup line. Hegi admitted that Sue was undeniably attractive, but he felt zero romantic feelings just then. Kawaku approached from behind, exuding pure intimidation. Kawaku sat down beside him and asked, Why didn't you come before? Hegi hesitated before answering. I wasn't sure if I should. Kawaku raised an eyebrow. So you finally made up your mind to come here and have Sue flirt with you? Hegi immediately panicked. No, that was just to test something. Actually, I really just wanted to see you. As soon as the words left his mouth, Hegi wanted to dig a hole and disappear. But then, Kawaku smirked and said, I wanted to see you too. Hegi short-circuited, face burning. He hurriedly ordered a whiskey to calm himself down. A week later, Hegi finally admitted it. He liked Kawaku. Now that his feelings were clear, another problem surfaced. He and Kawaku weren't close enough to casually meet up alone. So he needed a strategist. Hearing that Hegi was looking for a romance expert, Asagi immediately summoned Fuji. Hegi had a sinking feeling that this was a mistake. Fuji, being a BL and battle romance manga artist, was more than ready to give advice. Lost in thought, Hegi wandered the streets aimlessly. He was so absorbed in his dilemma that he didn't notice Kawaku approaching, seeing him sulking. Kawaku immediately became concerned. She remembered that Hegi liked sweets, so she invited him to a newly opened dessert cafe that weekend. Hegi, thinking this was a one-on-one date, was thrilled. Kawaku had also invited Sue and the others, but they ended up canceling. Feeling awkward about going alone, she messaged Hegi to cancel as well. Hegi didn't mind at first, but a few days later, Tokaiwa informed Kawaku that Hegi had been so devastated that he fell into a deep depression. Kawaku was horrified. Wait, was he really that excited about dessert? By the time Kawaku realized how much it had meant to Hegi, the dessert cafe had already closed. He had no way to make it up to him. Fuji, ever the problem solver, offered a suggestion, a very questionable suggestion, and Kawaku, for some reason, went along with it. Meanwhile, Hegi's older sister had come to visit. Hearing about Hegi's heartbreak, she told him to keep trying. Then, for some unknown reason, she shoved him outside to wait for a package instead of a delivery. However, Kawaku arrived, holding a box of homemade sweets. Hegi was overjoyed. He invited Kawaku inside. Then, disaster struck as he turned. Hegi accidentally kicked his sister's high heels, and at that very moment, his sister poked her head out from behind him. Hegi's brain immediately went into crisis mode. Oh no? Before he could explain, Kawaku assumed she had just walked in on a couple. I'm sorry for interrupting. Then she turned and bolted. Tokaiwa and Sue, who had witnessed everything, were completely speechless. Sue, however, immediately realized what had happened. Hegi called her sister. It all made sense now, but by the time they turned back around, Kawaku was already gone. Sue started wondering if there was a way to clear up the misunderstandings. She felt it would be better if the two talked it out on their own. So she invited Tokaiwa for a walk in a nearby plaza. However, she soon led Tokaiwa straight into a men's clothing store. Tokaiwa thought that Sue looked great in women's clothing too. But perhaps Sue had a personal attachment to men's clothing, so he didn't ask further. To his surprise, Sue was actually picking out clothes for him and even suggested they buy matching outfits. Tokaiwa hesitated. Wearing matching outfits seemed risky, given that Sue's mysterious prince persona was quite well known at school. However, he couldn't. Tokaiwa and Asagi dragged Hegi out of his house for a camping trip. Hegi had been preoccupied with thoughts of Kawaku and feelings sentimental. Sue revealed that he had deliberately kept the trip a secret from Hegi, knowing he might try to escape. Before setting up camp, Fuji reminded everyone that they needed to pitch the tents first. Sue strategically assigned Kawaku and Hegi to start a fire together. Kawaku felt quite awkward about it, as Hegi complimented the cake. Kawaku took the chance to ask what had happened that day. When he found out, he immediately apologized. It turned out that she had mistakenly thought she was interrupting a couple's romantic moment. It was still embarrassing. Hegi quickly clarified that the person with him was his older sister. Realizing the truth, she let out a sigh of relief and instinctively said, "That's a relief." Hegi suddenly became aware of something and mustered the courage to confess his feelings to Kawaku. However, just as he was about to say it, he hesitated, feeling that it was too sudden. Kawaku, on the other hand, completely misunderstood and assumed Hegi was talking about desserts. So he quietly pulled out a bag of marshmallows and said, "This is all I have for now." Seeing this, Sue concluded that things should be fine. After setting up camp, they all slid down grassy slopes using mats, since there were only 5 mats. Fuji naturally ended up sitting with Asagi. Meanwhile, Hegi tumbled down a hill, and later, they all enjoyed a barbecue together. Others? In Fuji's opinion, Hegi and Kawaku's situation wasn't too concerning. The real issue was Sue. He had expected Sue to win over Tokaiwa quickly, but Tokaiwa, being oblivious as ever, seemed completely unaware. Sue simply smiled and said there was no rush. He wanted a guaranteed win, so taking his time didn't matter. After dinner, he swiftly arranged tasks so that Tokaiwa and Sue were left alone at the campsite. Tokaiwa sighed in relief, happy that Hegi had returned to normal before summer break ended. He pulled Sue along to stargaze and casually remarked, "The moon is so beautiful tonight." Sue raised an eyebrow and teased. That was quite a sudden and romantic confession. Tokaiwa nearly choked on his drink. Panicked, he hurried to explain that he was only commenting on the scenery. Tonight, the moon is beautiful. Tokaiwa's heart started racing. At that exact moment, Asagi returned, breaking the moment. Fuji sighed and teased. "Didn't you say you were taking things slow?" Sue chuckled, saying, "I am." That night, everyone slept in tents. But Hegi, knowing that Kawaku was in the tent next to him, couldn't sleep at all. Instead, he crouched outside, staring at the night sky. He noticed a cute sparrow nearby and was about to take a picture to send to Kawaku, only to find that Kawaku was already awake and greeting him. When he casually mentioned how beautiful the morning light was, Hegi, hearing Kawaku's voice, felt a deep sense of peace. Unable to resist, he leaned against Kawaku's shoulder. After the camping trip, Tokaiwa happened to encounter Sue at school with women's clothing. As a car passed by, Tokaiwa instinctively pulled Sue closer to the side. Later, Tokaiwa attended class with Sue dressed in men's attire. Suddenly, they received news that the next class was canceled. Tokaiwa was abruptly dragged away by two girls. However, they were outraged to discover that, despite having the mysterious prince in his life, Tokaiwa was still getting close to another girl. Upon hearing the description of a black-haired girl, Tokaiwa immediately thought of Sue in female attire. After all, Sue was the only girl he was close to. The two girls then confronted him. Who do you choose? The mysterious prince or that black-haired girl? Tokaiwa was dumbfounded. Why did he even have to choose? The girls were heartbroken. Wow, what a player! Just then, Sue appeared, playfully teasing Tokaiwa by asking who the black-haired girl was. Tokaiwa, thinking Sue was unaware of the situation, quietly explained that he had only been close to Sue recently. Meanwhile, Asagi, who had gone to a bar to visit Fuji, accidentally spilled alcohol on himself. Fuji recalled a spare uniform in the storage room and had Asagi wear it for the time being. Asagi had barely changed when a customer arrived and mistook him for a handsome new waiter. Fuji, more amused than concerned, let the misunderstandings continue. After all, Asagi was naturally sweet and polite, so he wouldn't offend anyone. However, when Fuji finally called out to Asagi, Asagi, like a well-trained pet, leaned in close, letting Fuji tease him. The customer, noticing Asagi had an Adam's apple, turned pale with realization. At that moment, the bartender returned with Asagi's cleaned clothes, and both parties awkwardly apologized to each other. Shortly after, Fuji entered the bathroom wearing a tank top and carrying cocktail mixing tools. He explained that since Asagi seemed interested in bartending, he would personally teach him. After Fuji demonstrated proper bartending techniques, he stepped back to let Asagi try. Asagi attempted to mix a drink, but ended up spilling it all over himself. Through perseverance, Asagi finally managed to mix a somewhat decent-looking drink. However, the taste was mediocre at best. Determined, Asagi vowed to improve and promised that, from now on, he would be the one making drinks for Fuji. Fuji smirked, saying he looked forward to it. Recently, Sue had stopped attending school in men's clothing. Tokaiwa knew this would cause a stir among fans. The two girls who had questioned him earlier also noticed something odd. They suspected the siblings had fought over Tokaiwa, and that their prince might have gotten injured in the process. But the very next day, the prince returned, this time wearing matching outfits with Tokaiwa. It turned out Sue had been dressing in female clothing to lower Tokaiwa's guard. The moment Tokaiwa agreed to wear matching clothes, Sue launched a sneak attack. The two fans were furious. Tokaiwa was way too sneaky. He had their prince wrapped around his finger. On another front, Hegi's older sister quickly noticed that her brother had a crush on Kawaku. However, she didn't realize that Kawaku was actually a girl. Still, she was ready to support his relationship, while Hegi was paying the bill at a store. His drunk sister wandered to a nearby train station, where she happened to encounter Kawaku. Recognizing Hegi's sister, Kawaku stayed to take care of her and messaged Hegi to come pick her up. The sister, meanwhile, was eager to sell her brother's good qualities. Being particular about appearances, she was deeply fascinated by Kawaku's face. She mentioned that Hegi always claimed to like small, cute girls. Before she could finish her sentence about Hegi's crush, Hegi arrived, feeling guilty for troubling Kawaku and quickly taking his sister away. Thinking about the small and cute girl that Hegi supposedly liked, Kawaku felt that his own composed and mature appearance was the complete opposite. That day, Asagi excitedly told Hegi that he had collected enough loyalty points at the men's bar to take a photo with a chosen employee. Hegi rushed to the scene and managed to get a card for himself. But as he turned around, he saw Fuji already taking pictures with Asagi, posing in all sorts of intimate and affectionate ways. Hagi blushed furiously, feeling a mix of admiration and envy. He also wanted to get closer to Kawaku, but his progress was non-existent, luckily. He overheard some girls chatting about the upcoming summer festival. So when Kawaku emerged from the back, Hagi gathered his courage and invited him to go to the festival together. Kawaku accepted. Meanwhile, Suu, upon hearing this, immediately dragged Tokaiwa and two others along. He believed that Kawaku and Hagi were too passive and would miss their chance, so he planned to secretly watch over them. Tokaiwa, however, looked at Suu and Fuji, who were both dazzling in their yukatas. You call this secretly watching over them? Suu dismissed his concerns, saying that Hagi and Kawaku wouldn't arrive for a while, so they should enjoy the festival first. Fuji took Asagi to a shooting game booth, where he casually demonstrated how to shoot before slipping his hand around Asagi's waist. Meanwhile, Tokaiwa and Suu were at a candy stall. As more and more people gathered to watch them, Tokaiwa worried about causing a commotion. To avoid drawing too much attention, he reached out and used a mask to cover Suu's face. Suu, usually composed, momentarily lost his grip, accidentally breaking the sugar candy he was holding. Despite the minor mishap, they were all having fun. However, Tokaiwa quickly reminded himself that their goal was to observe Hagi and Kawaku. Hagi anxiously waited for Kawaku, worried that he might change his mind at the last minute. Just as he started to lose hope, Kawaku appeared, wearing a kimono. This was the first time Hagi had seen Kawaku dressed as a girl, and it completely overwhelmed him. Flustered, he quickly complimented Kawaku, calling him cute. Kawaku, slightly embarrassed, accepted the praise. They then went to buy sweets together. Hagi stared at Kawaku in awe, unable to handle the sheer level of cuteness. Kawaku then asked Hagi if he wanted a candy apple, warning that it could get sticky. The thought of eating it made Hagi blush, but what troubled him even more was that, despite finally getting to see Kawaku in female clothing, his mind kept drifting to Kawaku's usual male appearance. Wasn't he the one who wanted to see Kawaku in a dress the most? And now that it had happened, why was he still thinking about Kawaku in men's clothes? Hagi felt like the worst kind of person, sensing Hagi's hesitation. Kawaku thought about leaving early, but before he could, Hagi stopped him and sincerely thanked him for accepting the invitation. Then, he nervously asked if Kawaku would like to go out with him again next time. Just the two of them. Kawaku was puzzled. Wouldn't you find hanging out with me boring? Hagi shook his head. No way. I really enjoy spending time with you. But deep down, he couldn't stop thinking about Kawaku in men's clothing. The next day, Tokaiwa and Asagi visited the men's bar again and discovered that Suu and the others were hosting a summer festival event. Today, they were also wearing yukatas. Hagi couldn't come because of work, and Kawaku seemed a little down about it. Tokaiwa also noticed that the female customers at the bar were dressed in yukatas, looking beautifully elegant, just as his gaze lingered on some of them. Suu narrowed his eyes and suddenly raised a hand, blocking Tokaiwa's view. Focus. Take a good look at me in my yukata. Tokaiwa's heart pounded wildly, but he quickly brushed off his emotions, convincing himself that this was just how Suu treated customers. One day, Asagi suddenly asked Kawaku to teach him how to be cooler. This was because Fuji had recently talked about the appeal of cool guys, and Asagi decided to interview Kawaku, who had a reputation as a dominant CEO type. Kawaku immediately wrote down his personal insights on how to play the role. Asagi followed the script Kawaku provided, but something felt off. Later, Fuji took Asagi to a karaoke bar, saying he needed some reference photos. However, calling Kawaku's quotes. Meanwhile, Fuji instructed him to do various poses, and Asagi obediently followed. Like when Fuji asked for a barefoot shot, Asagi instantly removed his shoes. Fuji, having already noticed Asagi imitating Kawaku, effortlessly lifted Asagi's legs onto his shoulders and demonstrated what a real dominant role should be like. Hearing that Fuji had a tight deadline, Asagi went to help him and even stuck a handcuff sticker on his manuscript. Since this manga was a collaboration with other authors, Fuji had even bought real handcuffs for reference. Seeing Asagi's curiosity, Fuji couldn't resist messing with him and casually cuffed Asagi's hand. Unfortunately, Fuji needed to fax his manuscript immediately, and they couldn't find the key. The two had no choice but to go outside while still handcuffed together. At one point, a car passed by, and Asagi instinctively pulled Fuji into his arms to prevent him from getting grazed. However, Asagi had pulled too hard, leaving red marks on Fuji's wrist. Feeling guilty, Asagi fussed over him, thinking about how important Fuji's hands were. Fuji took Asagi to the store, where he bought the handcuffs, intending to get a spare key. But when they arrived, they realized the toy handcuffs had a safety release button all along. Later, Asagi found his old sports wristbands and decided to give one to Fuji to cover the marks. However, he accidentally gave him a used one. To his surprise, Fuji kept it anyway. Meanwhile, Kawaku was feeling chilly in just a dress shirt. The bar staff suggested holding a uniform swap event to entertain the guests. When new female customers saw Kawaku dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, they loved the contrast. Fuji, on the other hand, wore Sue's bartender uniform. However, as a natural bartender, every time she moved, the jacket slipped off her shoulders. Sue, wearing Kawaku's shirt, transformed from his usual prince image into a mischievous wolf pup. Since the bar became busier, Sue had to work several consecutive days. A few days later, she noticed something was off and immediately called Tokaiwa to bring fever medicine. When Tokaiwa arrived, Sue was still holding on, pretending to be fine. But the moment Tokaiwa touched her, he realized her temperature was abnormally high. In the end, Tokaiwa carried Sue home. Before leaving, Tokaiwa rang the doorbell to hand Sue some cooling patches, finding that the door was slightly open and Sue collapsed at the entrance. Without hesitation, Tokaiwa picked her up and put her on the couch. A quick temperature check, 38.5 C. Sue, who hated showing weakness, remained silent. Tokaiwa couldn't help but laugh. Does this mean I've seen a rare side of you? Ever since seeing Kawaku in women's clothing, Hegi began to suspect he might be a playboy. After actually seeing Kawaku in a dress, he started longing to see Kawaku in men's clothing again. His sister noticed something was off with him. Just then, Kawaku called, asking for help. Hegi, Tokaiwa, and the others rushed over and found out that Kawaku had been asked by a relative to help at a snack shop during seeing too many customers. Hegi was both thrilled and awkward upon seeing Kawaku in men's clothing again. Watching Kawaku again, Hegi found her both adorable and handsome. Realizing he was attracted to both Kawaku's male and female appearances, he thought, "Am I just a complete scumbag?" At that moment, Kawaku encountered a group of male customers who didn't realize Kawaku's true gender. They casually even invited her to a gym, preparing to pat her stomach. Hegi immediately intervened, slapping the man's hand away. Hegi mumbled to himself, "I haven't even held Kawaku's hand yet." Kawaku sensed Hegi had something on his mind. But the moment she approached, Hegi shouted in panic and ran away. Later, the store owner announced that they could take turns resting. Sue wasn't interested, but Asagi loved the ocean and dragged both Tokaiwa and Hegi into the water, where all three ended up falling in. Sue playfully used a cold towel on Tokaiwa, while Hegi watched in distress, feeling like he was being force-fed dog food. Sue then dragged Tokaiwa away for a walk along the shore. Of course, Sue's striking appearance attracted many girls' attention. Tokaiwa then noticed Sue's neck was sunburned and offered to apply sunscreen. Unexpectedly, Sue was the one who applied sunscreen to him instead. Just as Sue was about to apply it to his back, the surrounding girls looked on and greater than. Tokaiwa tried to escape her only to be knocked over by a wave. Sue reached out but got dragged in too, and since they were already wet, they decided to just play in the water. When they returned to the shop, Fuji was unable to figure out their relationship status. After the snack shop finally closed, the owner thanked them with fireworks. Then, Sue and the others came out wearing full-on women's outfits. This was Hagi's first time seeing all of them dressed as women. However, he was the only one flustered. At the beach, Fuji took photos of Asagi. Asagi pulled Fuji into the frame to take a picture together. Meanwhile, Tokaiwa and Sue had fun choosing fireworks. But Hagi was still lost in thought. He kept picturing Kawaku in men's clothing instead. Just then, Kawaku came over holding sparklers. Hagi struggled to find a topic, but was taken aback when Kawaku suddenly asked, "Did I do something wrong? Ever since the summer festival, Hagi had been acting strangely." Hagi panicked, realizing he might have hurt Kawaku's feelings. He blurted out the dumbest thing possible. "I think I might be two-timing scum." Kawaku froze. Hagi, now consumed with guilt, listened as Kawaku offered to help analyze the situation. So, Hagi described his friend's dilemma. This guy has a crush on a girl, but the girl often wears men's clothes, and he's always wanted to see her in women's clothing. However, after finally seeing it, he can't stop thinking about how good she looks in men's clothing to Dot. It sounds like he's cheating, doesn't it? And was well aware of his feelings. Kawaku then asked if Hagi remembered the time they went out for Sundays together. Back then, Kawaku was also dressed in men's clothing and had been very self-conscious about how others viewed him. However, Hagi's words back then had reassured him and helped him let go of his worries. Kawaku admitted she wasn't very good at romance and wasn't sure if she could help Hagi. Hagi replied that he would pass the message along to his friend. At that moment, the others were already setting off fireworks and called for them to join. Hagi finally calmed down, realizing that it was precisely because he liked Kawaku that he had been overthinking everything. Kawaku pulled Hagi up from the sand, and for the first time, Hagi held hands with Kawaku. He was so happy that, overwhelmed with nerves, he immediately ran away. Kawaku was about to chase after him when she suddenly recalled Hagi's words about his friend liking a girl who often dressed in men's clothing. She froze on the spot. Meanwhile, Tokaiwa and the others were invited to stay the night at the shop later while drinking. Hagi found himself grinning like an idiot at his own hands, reminiscing about the hand-holding moment. Then, out of nowhere, he became curious. Did Kawaku have a significant other? After all, Kawaku was both handsome and adorable. There had to be someone who noticed his charm before Hagi. Did not as Hagi got drunk, he started crying and making a scene. Asagi quickly comforted him, saying that if Kawaku had gone to a matchmaking event to meet other guys, he probably wouldn't be single. As a result, the next morning, Hagi couldn't wake up in time. Tokaiwa ended up going sightseeing alone, but unexpectedly ran into Sue, who was taking a morning walk by the beach. Hearing that Sue was just out for a stroll, Tokaiwa invited her to explore the area together. As for the bar shift Sue had later, she casually replied, "That can wait." As Tokaiwa and Sue wandered around, they came across a stall selling takoyaki pancakes. Tokaiwa handed her water bottle to Sue, then turned to buy a pancake. The vendor commented that Tokaiwa was quite lucky. Her takoyaki pancakes had an octopus leg, shaped like a heart. A nearby girl wanted to take a picture with the heart-shaped pancake, but before she could, Sue immediately stepped in and pulled Tokaiwa away. Tokaiwa asked if Sue wanted to try a bit, just as Tokaiwa was about to retrieve her water bottle from Sue. She was caught off guard when Sue leaned in and took a bite directly from the pancake in her hand. In just one move, Sue had chewed the pancakes into the shape of a new heart. Tokaiwa, completely oblivious to the implications, casually took a bite as well. The two continued their stroll and eventually arrived at a mountaintop with a wishing bell. Tokaiwa struggled to think of a wish. Just then, Sue mentioned that she had a wish. She asked Tokaiwa to * ring the bell with her, * as a way of blessing her wish to come true. Seizing the opportunity, Sue intertwined their pinky fingers. After making their wishes, Tokaiwa grew curious about what Sue had wished for, but Sue smoothly changed the subject. After a brief pause, she finally added, "You'll find out one day." At this point, it was clear Tokaiwa was completely wrapped around Sue's finger.